Marcus Thornfield had served as a royal guard for 12 years, and never once had he questioned his loyalty to King Edmund. The morning sun cast long shadows across the castle courtyard as he made his usual rounds, his polished armor gleaming in the early light. At 32, Marcus was considered one of the most trusted guards in the entire kingdom of Valyria. His reputation was spotless, his dedication unwavering. The castle buzzed with unusual activity that morning. Servants hurried through the corridors, their faces tense with worry. Marcus noticed the change immediately. Something was different, something that made his trained instincts tingle with unease. He had learned to trust these feelings during his years of service. "Marcus," called Sir Roland, the captain of the guard, approaching with hurried steps. "The king requests your immediate presence in the throne room." "It's urgent." Marcus straightened his shoulders and nodded. Urgent summons from the king were rare, especially for individual guards. He wondered what could be so pressing that King Edmund would call for him specifically. As he walked through the familiar halls, he noticed more guards than usual positioned at various points. Their eyes followed him as he passed, which struck him as odd. The massive oak doors to the throne room stood open, revealing the magnificent chamber within. King Edmund sat on his golden throne, but his usual warm demeanor was replaced by something cold and calculating. Beside him stood Lord Aldrich, the king's advisor, whose thin smile never reached his eyes. Marcus had always felt uncomfortable around Aldrich, though he could never pinpoint exactly why. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, dropping to one knee and bowing his head respectfully. "Rise." "Marcus," the king said, his voice carrying an unusual weight, "I have a special mission for you. One that requires absolute discretion and loyalty." Marcus stood, keeping his expression neutral despite his growing curiosity. "I am at your service, my lord." King Edmund leaned forward slightly. "There have been reports of rebel activity in the northern villages, specifically in the village of Millbrook. I need someone I trust completely to investigate these claims and report back to me personally." The request seemed straightforward enough, but something in the king's tone made Marcus pause. Millbrook was a small, peaceful farming community. The idea of rebel activity there seemed unlikely, but Marcus had learned not to question his orders. "Of course, your Majesty. When shall I depart?" "Immediately," Lord Aldrich interjected, stepping forward with a sealed envelope. "These are your written orders and a map of the area. You are to travel alone and maintain complete secrecy about this mission." Marcus accepted the envelope, feeling its weight in his hands. The wax seal bore the king's personal insignia. "Understood, my lord." As he turned to leave, King Edmund's voice stopped him. "Marcus, remember that the crown's enemies can be found in the most unexpected places. Trust no one completely and question everything you see." Those words echoed in Marcus's mind as he prepared for his journey. Within an hour, he had gathered his supplies, saddled his horse, and was riding through the castle gates. The morning had grown overcast, and dark clouds gathered on the horizon like an omen. The ride to Millbrook would take 2 days through forests and winding mountain paths. As Marcus traveled, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The king's behavior had been strange, almost nervous. Lord Aldrich's presence during the briefing also bothered him. Typically, such missions were handled through the normal chain of command, not directly from the throne room. On his first night camping in the forest, Marcus opened the sealed orders to study them more carefully. The instructions were detailed but vague, asking him to investigate suspicious activities and report any evidence of disloyalty to the crown. The language was formal, but something about it felt off. After 12 years of receiving orders, Marcus had developed a sense for authentic royal communications. The next morning brought rain, making the mountain paths treacherous and slippery. Marcus's horse Thunder picked his way carefully along the narrow trail. The forest seemed unusually quiet, with no bird songs or small animal sounds. Even the insects seemed to have disappeared. As they rounded a bend in the path, Marcus spotted something that made his blood run cold. Fresh horse tracks in the mud. Too many tracks for casual travelers. Someone had been through this area recently with a large group. The tracks led in the direction of Millbrook, but they also showed signs of horses returning along the same path. Marcus dismounted to examine the tracks more closely. His training had taught him to read signs in the wilderness, and what he saw troubled him greatly. These weren't the tracks of farmers or merchants. The depth and spacing indicated war horses carrying armed riders. Even more concerning, some of the tracks showed the distinctive markings of royal cavalry horseshoes. A terrible possibility began to form in Marcus's mind. What if this wasn't a mission to investigate rebels? What if he was being sent into a trap? The thought seemed absurd at first, but the evidence before him was difficult to ignore. Why would royal cavalry be in this remote area? And why hadn't he been told about their presence? Thunder whinnied nervously, sensing his master's tension. Marcus patted the horse's neck, trying to calm both the animal and himself. He had two choices: continue to Millbrook as ordered, or turn back and demand answers. His training told him to follow orders without question, but his instincts screamed danger. As he stood in the rain, studying the muddy tracks, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He would continue to Millbrook, but he would approach carefully and keep his eyes open for any signs of treachery. If this was indeed a trap, he needed to know who was behind it and why. The rain continued to fall as Marcus remounted Thunder and continued along the path. With each step closer to Millbrook, the weight of uncertainty grew heavier on his shoulders. After 12 years of faithful service, he was about to discover that loyalty and honor could be far more complicated than he had ever imagined. Marcus approached Millbrook with extreme caution as the afternoon sun began to break through the storm clouds. The village lay in a valley surrounded by rolling hills covered in wheat fields. From his position on the ridge above, everything looked peaceful and normal. Smoke rose from chimneys, and he could see people moving about their daily activities. But the horse tracks told a different story. They led directly toward the village, and Marcus could now see where they split into different directions, surrounding the settlement like a military formation. His heart pounded as he realized this was exactly how royal cavalry would position themselves for an attack or ambush. He tied Thunder to a tree well hidden from view and continued on foot, moving carefully through the tall grass and using the stone walls between fields for cover. His years of training had taught him how to move silently, and now those skills might save his life. As he got closer to the village, Marcus heard something that chilled him to the bone. The sound of metal clashing against metal echoed from the direction of the main square. Someone was fighting, and from the sounds, it wasn't a friendly sparring match. He crept closer, staying low behind a wooden fence that surrounded a farmhouse. What he saw when he peered over the fence made his blood run cold. Royal guards wearing the same uniform he wore were systematically searching every house in the village. But these weren't peaceful searches. Doors were being kicked in, furniture was being overturned, and villagers were being roughly handled. In the center of the square, Marcus spotted a familiar figure directing the operation. Sir Garrett, another royal guard he had served alongside for years, was shouting orders to the men. But something was terribly wrong with this picture. Sir Garrett was supposed to be at the castle, not leading a raid on innocent villagers. "Search every building," Garrett commanded. "Leave no stone unturned. We need to find evidence of their treachery before he arrives." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Who were they talking about? And what evidence were they looking for? More importantly, why were royal guards terrorizing civilians? He watched as an elderly man was dragged from his home, protesting his innocence. The man's wife followed, tears streaming down her face as she begged the guards not to hurt her husband. Marcus recognized them as Thomas and Mary Fletcher, honest farmers he had met on a previous patrol through this region years ago. "Please," Thomas Fletcher cried out. "We have done nothing wrong. We are loyal subjects of the king." Sir Garrett approached the old man with a cruel smile. "Loyalty? Is that what you call harboring enemies of the crown? We know about your secret meetings, old man. We know about the messages you've been passing." Marcus was confused. He knew Thomas Fletcher personally, and the idea that this simple farmer could be involved in any kind of conspiracy was absurd. The man could barely read, let alone organize rebel activities. That's when Marcus realized the horrible truth. This wasn't about finding real rebels. This was about creating evidence where none existed. He watched in horror as one of the guards planted a bag of items in the Fletcher's home, then emerged claiming to have found suspicious documents. "Look what we discovered," the guard announced loudly, holding up papers that Marcus was certain hadn't been there moments before. Letters planning attacks on royal caravans. The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place in Marcus's mind. He had been sent here not to investigate rebel activity, but to witness it being manufactured. Someone wanted him to see this staged operation and report back to the king, but why? His answer came when he heard Sir Garrett speaking to another guard in low tones. When Marcus arrives and sees all this evidence, he'll report back exactly what Lord Aldrich wants him to report. The king will have no choice but to authorize harsh measures against these villages. Marcus felt sick to his stomach. Lord Aldrich, the king's advisor, was behind this deception. But what was his ultimate goal? Why frame innocent villagers? And why involve Marcus specifically in the scheme? As he pondered these questions, Marcus heard the sound of approaching horses. His heart sank as he realized they were coming from the direction where he had left Thunder. Had they discovered his presence? He pressed himself lower against the fence, trying to become invisible. 3 riders approached the village square, and Marcus recognized one of them immediately. Captain Roland, his own superior, was leading the group. But instead of the honorable man Marcus had always known, Roland's face wore an expression of cold calculation. "Is everything prepared?" Roland asked Garrett as he dismounted. "Yes, sir. We have planted enough evidence to justify any action the Crown wishes to take. When Marcus sees this, his report will give us the excuse we need." "Good," Roland replied. "Lord Aldrich's plan is working perfectly. The king trusts Marcus completely. His testimony will be unquestioned." Marcus felt betrayed and confused. These were men he had served with, men he had trusted with his life. Now they were discussing him as if he were nothing more than a tool to be used in their scheme. But what was the larger plan? What did Lord Aldrich hope to accomplish by framing innocent villagers? The answer came from Roland's next words. "Once the king authorizes military action against these villages, we'll have the excuse we need to station troops throughout the northern regions. From there it will be easy to control the trade routes and tax collections. Lord Aldrich will finally have the power base he needs." Now Marcus understood. This wasn't about rebels or loyalty. This was about Lord Aldrich consolidating power and wealth. By creating a false threat, he could justify placing his own people in control of profitable regions throughout the kingdom, and Marcus was meant to be the unwitting messenger who would make it all possible. But there was something else bothering Marcus. If this was truly Lord Aldrich's plan, did King Edmund know about it? Was his beloved king part of this conspiracy, or was he being deceived as well? As if reading his thoughts, he heard Garrett ask, "What about the king? Does he suspect anything?" Roland shook his head. "King Edmund suspects nothing. He trusts Aldrich completely and believes these reports of rebel activity are genuine. When Marcus confirms what we've staged here, the king will act exactly as Aldrich predicts." Relief and determination flooded through Marcus simultaneously. His king was innocent, but he was being manipulated by those closest to him. Marcus now faced an impossible choice. If he reported what he was supposed to see, he would be helping Lord Aldrich's conspiracy succeed. But if he reported the truth, would anyone believe him over such respected members of the royal court? As night began to fall, Marcus realized he needed more evidence before he could act. He had to find proof of Lord Aldrich's involvement that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. His next moves would determine not just his own fate, but possibly the future of the entire kingdom. The trap had been set perfectly, but Marcus was no longer the naive guard who had left the castle that morning. He was now a man with dangerous knowledge, and he intended to use it wisely. Marcus spent the entire night hidden in an abandoned barn on the outskirts of Millbrook, watching and listening to everything that happened in the village. What he witnessed made his stomach turn with disgust and anger. The fake operation continued well into the evening, with more evidence being planted and more innocent villagers being arrested on fabricated charges. By dawn, Sir Garrett and his men had created what appeared to be a massive rebel conspiracy. They had forged documents, planted weapons, and even convinced some villagers to confess to crimes they hadn't committed by threatening their families. The level of deception was breathtaking in its scope and cruelty. Marcus knew he had to gather solid proof before returning to the castle. His word alone would never be enough to convince King Edmund that his trusted advisor was a traitor. He needed something concrete, something that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. His opportunity came when he overheard Roland and Garrett discussing their next steps. They were planning to meet with Lord Aldrich's personal messenger at an old watchtower ruins about 5 miles north of the village. The messenger was carrying written instructions for the next phase of the plan. Marcus waited until the corrupt guards had finished their work in Millbrook and departed. Then he retrieved Thunder and began following them at a safe distance. The watchtower ruins stood on a hilltop that had once served as a lookout point for ancient kings. Now it would serve as the meeting place for modern traders. He arrived at the ruins before the others and found a perfect hiding spot among the crumbling stones. From there he could see and hear everything without being detected. The autumn wind whistled through the broken walls, providing natural cover for any small sounds he might make. Roland and Garrett arrived first, followed shortly by a hooded figure on a black horse. Marcus recognized the horse immediately. It belonged to Lord Aldrich's stable, which meant this messenger was definitely connected to the conspiracy. "Do you have Lord Aldrich's new instructions?" Roland asked the messenger. The hooded figure dismounted and removed a sealed letter from his saddlebag. "Everything is proceeding according to plan. Lord Aldrich is very pleased with your work in Millbrook." Marcus strained to hear every word as the messenger continued speaking. "The next phase involves 3 more villages in the eastern region. You are to repeat the same process there within the next 2 weeks. Lord Aldrich wants a pattern of rebel activity established before Marcus delivers his report." "What about Marcus himself?" Garrett asked. "When should he arrive at Millbrook?" The messenger smiled coldly. "He should arrive this afternoon just as we planned. He will see exactly what we want him to see and report back to the king with the evidence Lord Aldrich needs." Roland nodded approvingly. "And after the king authorizes military action? Then the real work begins," the messenger replied, opening the sealed letter. "Lord Aldrich has already selected the officers who will command the new military districts, men loyal to him, not to the crown. Within 6 months he will control more territory and wealth than anyone except the king himself." Marcus felt his blood boil as he listened to these traitors, casually discussing their plans to deceive his king and oppress innocent people, but he forced himself to remain calm and continue listening. He needed to hear everything. The messenger continued reading from the letter. "Lord Aldrich also wants you to know that he has begun placing his people in key positions throughout the castle. Soon he will have eyes and ears everywhere, making it impossible for anyone to oppose him." "What about Captain Marcus?" Garrett asked. "After he serves his purpose, will he become a problem?" The messenger's response chilled Marcus to the bone. "Lord Aldrich has plans for Captain Marcus. Once his report has served its purpose, he will meet with an unfortunate accident during his next mission. A loyal guard dying in service to the crown will only strengthen Lord Aldrich's position." Now Marcus knew that not only was he being used, but he was also marked for death. Lord Aldrich intended to eliminate him once he had outlived his usefulness. The scope of the conspiracy was larger and more dangerous than he had imagined. As the meeting continued, Marcus learned even more disturbing details. Lord Aldrich had been planning this scheme for over 2 years, slowly placing his supporters in important positions while undermining those loyal to King Edmund. The fake rebel threat was just the beginning of a larger plan to eventually control the entire kingdom. "When will Lord Aldrich make his final move?" Roland asked. "Patience," the messenger replied. "First, he must consolidate his power base through these military districts. Then, when the king is completely dependent on his advice and surrounded by Aldrich's people, the final phase can begin." Marcus didn't want to hear what the final phase involved, but he forced himself to keep listening. The messenger's next words confirmed his worst fears. "King Edmund is getting older and has no clear heir. When the time is right, Lord Aldrich will arrange for the king to meet with an accident. As the king's most trusted advisor, and the person controlling the military districts, he will naturally assume leadership of the kingdom." The full scope of Lord Aldrich's treachery was now clear. This wasn't just about power and wealth. It was about overthrowing King Edmund and seizing control of the entire kingdom. Marcus had unknowingly walked into the middle of a plot that threatened everything he held dear. As the meeting concluded, Marcus knew he had to act quickly. He had the evidence he needed, but getting it to King Edmund would be nearly impossible. Lord Aldrich had people everywhere, and Marcus was now a marked man. If he returned to the castle following normal procedures, he would likely be killed before he could deliver his information. The messenger and the corrupt guards began to leave, riding in different directions. Marcus waited until they were out of sight before emerging from his hiding place. His mind raced as he considered his options. He could try to reach the king directly, but Lord Aldrich's people would be watching for him. He could seek help from other loyal guards, but how could he know who to trust? As he stood among the ancient ruins, Marcus realized that his next decision would determine the fate of the kingdom. He had uncovered a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of government, and he was possibly the only person who could stop it. The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming, but he had sworn an oath to protect King Edmund and the people of Valeria. Thunder stamped his feet impatiently, sensing his master's tension. Marcus patted the horse's neck and made his decision. He would not return to Millbrook as expected. Instead, he would find another way to reach the king and expose Lord Aldrich's treachery. The trap that had been set for him would become a trap for the conspirators themselves. But first, he needed allies he could trust completely. And he knew exactly where to find them. Marcus rode hard through the night, pushing Thunder to his limits as they traveled toward the remote mountain monastery of St. Aldred. Brother Benedict, the head monk there, had been Marcus's mentor during his youth before he joined the Royal Guard. If anyone could be trusted with this dangerous information, it was the wise old monk who had taught him about honor and duty. The monastery sat high in the mountains. Far from the political intrigue of the castle, it was a place where men came to find peace and wisdom, away from the corruption of the world below. Marcus had visited occasionally over the years, and Brother Benedict had always welcomed him with open arms. As dawn broke over the mountain peaks, Marcus finally reached the monastery gates. The peaceful stone buildings looked exactly as he remembered them, with their simple architecture and well-tended gardens. It seemed impossible that such a serene place existed in the same world where Lord Aldrich was plotting to destroy everything good and decent. Brother Benedict greeted Marcus at the gate, his weathered face creased with concern. The old monk was in his 70s now, but his eyes were still sharp and intelligent. He had served as advisor to King Edmund's father years ago, before choosing the monastery life. "Marcus, my son," Benedict said warmly, then frowned as he noticed Marcus's haggard appearance. "You look troubled. What brings you here in such distress?" Marcus quickly explained everything he had discovered, from the staged rebel activity in Millbrook to Lord Aldrich's conspiracy to overthrow King Edmund. Brother Benedict listened intently, asking occasional questions but mostly letting Marcus tell his story without interruption. When Marcus finished, the old monk was silent for a long moment, stroking his gray beard thoughtfully. Finally, he spoke in his gentle but serious voice. "What you describe confirms suspicions I have harbored for some time," Benedict said gravely. "I receive visitors here from all corners of the kingdom, and recently I have heard troubling stories. Villages reporting increased tax burdens imposed by new officials, merchants complaining about new restrictions on trade routes, good men being removed from positions of authority for mysterious reasons." This revelation both relieved and terrified Marcus. He was relieved that his story was believable, but terrified to learn that Lord Aldrich's influence had already spread so far. "What should I do, brother?" Marcus asked. "If I return to the castle, they will kill me. But if I don't act soon, Lord Aldrich's plan will succeed." Brother Benedict stood up and began pacing around his small study, considering the problem carefully. "You cannot approach King Edmund directly. Lord Aldrich's people will be watching every entrance to the castle, and every person the king meets with. You need another way." "But how can I reach him?" Marcus asked desperately. A small smile appeared on the monk's face. "Tell me, Marcus, do you remember the Festival of Harvest that begins in 3 days? Marcus nodded. The Festival of Harvest was one of the kingdom's most important celebrations, held annually in the capital city. People came from all over the kingdom to participate in the festivities, and King Edmund always made public appearances during the celebration. "King Edmund will attend the festival as he does every year," Benedict continued. "But more importantly, he always visits the old cathedral for private prayers on the morning of the second day. It is a tradition he has maintained for 20 years, ever since his wife died." Marcus began to understand where this was leading. "You think I could reach him there?" "I know you can," Benedict said confidently. "I have friends in the cathedral who could arrange a meeting. Father Thomas, the head priest, has known both you and the king since you were children. He would help us if we explained the situation." Hope began to grow in Marcus's heart for the first time since this nightmare began, but there were still problems to solve. "Even if I can meet with the king, what proof do I have?" Marcus asked. "My word alone won't be enough to convince him that his most trusted advisor is a traitor." Brother Benedict smiled again and walked to an old wooden desk in the corner of his study. He opened a drawer and pulled out several pieces of paper covered with his careful handwriting. "For the past 6 months, I have been documenting the strange reports I've been hearing from visitors," he explained. Names, dates, locations, and details of suspicious activities. I didn't know what they meant at the time, but now your story makes everything clear. Marcus looked at the documents with amazement. Brother Benedict had unknowingly been gathering evidence of Lord Aldrich's conspiracy for months. Combined with what Marcus had witnessed, it would be impossible for the king to ignore. There's more, Benedict said, returning to the desk. 3 weeks ago, a wounded messenger arrived here in the middle of the night. He had been attacked by bandits while carrying documents from Lord Aldrich to someone in the Eastern Territories. The messenger died from his injuries, but I kept the documents thinking they might be important. He handed Marcus a sealed letter that bore Lord Aldrich's personal seal. Marcus opened it carefully and read the contents, his eyes widening with each sentence. The letter contained detailed instructions for bribing local officials and intimidating farmers into selling their land at unfair prices. It was signed with Lord Aldrich's name and bearing his official seal. This is perfect evidence, Marcus said excitedly. Combined with what I witnessed and your documentation, King Edmund will have to believe us. But Brother Benedict's expression remained serious. Getting to the king is only half the battle, Marcus. Even if we expose Lord Aldrich's conspiracy, his supporters are already in place throughout the government and military. They won't simply surrender when their leader is discovered. Marcus hadn't considered this problem. If Lord Aldrich had been planning for 2 years and had people everywhere, exposing him might trigger a wider conflict within the kingdom. What do you suggest? Marcus asked. We need to do more than just inform the king, Benedict replied. We need to gather loyal supporters and prepare for the possibility that this will become a fight for the kingdom's future. Lord Aldrich won't go down without a struggle. Over the next 2 days, Brother Benedict helped Marcus develop a comprehensive plan. They would approach King Edmund during his private prayers at the cathedral, present all their evidence, and propose a strategy for dealing with Lord Aldrich's network of supporters. But they also prepared for the possibility that their meeting with the king might fail or be discovered. Benedict used his network of contacts throughout the kingdom to identify military commanders, government officials, and local leaders who remained loyal to King Edmund and could be trusted to fight against Lord Aldrich if necessary. As the Festival of Harvest began in the capital city, Marcus prepared to make the most important journey of his life. He would have one chance to save his king and his kingdom. If he failed, Lord Aldrich's conspiracy would succeed, and everything Marcus had sworn to protect would be lost forever. But for the first time since discovering the conspiracy, Marcus felt confident about his chances. He had evidence, he had allies, and most importantly, he had a plan that might actually work. The boy who had left the monastery years ago to become a royal guard was returning as a man ready to fight for the future of his kingdom. The Festival of Harvest had transformed the capital city into a celebration of color, music, and joy. Streets were decorated with golden banners and autumn flowers, while merchants sold their finest goods from temporary stalls. People from across the kingdom had gathered to celebrate another successful harvest, unaware that their kingdom's future hung in the balance. Marcus arrived in the city before dawn, wearing simple farmer's clothes instead of his royal guard uniform. Brother Benedict had arranged for him to stay with Father Thomas at the cathedral, where he would wait for the perfect moment to approach King Edmund. Father Thomas was a kind man in his 60s who had served at the cathedral for most of his adult life. He remembered both Marcus and King Edmund as young boys, and he was deeply troubled to learn about Lord Aldrich's conspiracy. The king has been under tremendous stress lately, Father Thomas confided as they prepared for the morning service. He speaks often about threats to the kingdom, but I suspect he doesn't know who his real enemies are. As the morning progressed, Marcus watched from a hidden alcove as the cathedral filled with festival worshippers. He saw several faces he recognized from the castle, including some guards who might be loyal to Lord Aldrich. His heart pounded as he realized how dangerous this situation was. If anyone recognized him, the entire plan would fail. At precisely 10 o'clock, King Edmund arrived for his private prayers, just as Brother Benedict had predicted. He entered through a side door, accompanied by only 2 guards. Marcus recognized both guards as men he had served with for years, but after recent events he couldn't be certain of their loyalty. Father Thomas approached the king respectfully. "Your Majesty, there is someone here who urgently needs to speak with you about matters of great importance to the kingdom." King Edmund looked surprised and slightly annoyed. His private prayer time was sacred to him, and he didn't appreciate interruptions. But something in Father Thomas's tone must have convinced him that this was serious. "Who wishes to speak with me?" the king asked. "Marcus Thornfield, your majesty. He has uncovered information that threatens the safety of your realm." The king's expression changed immediately from annoyance to concern. He knew Marcus was supposed to be investigating rebel activity in the northern villages, not meeting secretly in the cathedral. "Send him in," King Edmund commanded. While instructing his guards to wait outside the prayer chamber, Marcus stepped forward from his hiding place, dropping to one knee before his king. Up close, he could see how much stress had aged King Edmund in recent months. The man who had once seemed invincible now looked tired and worried. "Rise, Marcus," the king said firmly. "Explain why you are here instead of carrying out your mission in Millbrook." Marcus took a deep breath and began telling his story. He explained everything he had witnessed, from the staged rebel activity to the conspiracy meeting at the Watchtower ruins. He presented Brother Benedict's documentation and the intercepted letter bearing Lord Aldrich's seal. King Edmund listened in stunned silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. When Marcus finished speaking, the king was quiet for a long moment, studying the evidence with shaking hands. "This is impossible," the king whispered finally. "Aldrich has been my most trusted advisor for 15 years. He has served my family faithfully since before I became king." "I understand your shock, your majesty," Marcus said gently. "I felt the same way when I discovered the truth. But the evidence is overwhelming." King Edmund read through the documents again, his expression growing darker with each page. "If what you say is true, then I have been blind to the greatest threat my kingdom has ever faced. But how can I know for certain that this evidence is genuine? How can I be sure that you are not part of some elaborate deception?" Marcus had expected this question and was prepared for it. "Your Majesty, you have known me for 12 years. Have I ever given you reason to doubt my loyalty? Have I ever asked for anything in return for my service except the honor of protecting you and this kingdom?" The king studied Marcus's face carefully, looking for any sign of deception. After a moment, his expression softened slightly. "No, Marcus, you have been completely faithful in your service. But the accusations you make are so serious that I must be absolutely certain before taking action." "Then test me, your majesty," Marcus said boldly. "Send me back to Millbrook as if nothing has changed. Have your most trusted men follow me secretly and verify everything I have told you. But please do not let Lord Aldrich know that you suspect anything until you have confirmed the truth." King Edmund considered this proposal carefully. It was risky, but it would provide the proof he needed to act decisively. "Very well," the king decided, "but I will not send you back into danger alone. I will have loyal men positioned throughout the area, and at the first sign that you are in immediate danger, they will intervene." Marcus felt a surge of relief. The king believed him, or at least believed him enough to investigate further. It was more than he had dared hope for. But their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. The cathedral door opened, and Lord Aldrich himself entered the prayer chamber, accompanied by several guards. "Your Majesty," Aldrich said with his usual smooth smile, "I was told you were here and wanted to update you on some urgent matters. But I see you already have company." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice as Lord Aldrich's eyes fixed on him with unmistakable recognition. The advisor's smile never wavered, but there was something deadly in his gaze. "Marcus," Aldrich said pleasantly, "I wasn't expecting to see you back from your mission so soon. I trust everything went well in Millbrook?" The question was a trap, and Marcus knew it. If he claimed to have completed his mission, Aldrich would know he was lying, since the staged operation wasn't supposed to be discovered yet. If he admitted he hadn't completed it, Aldrich would want to know why he had returned. King Edmund looked between the two men, sensing the tension in the air. Marcus realized that their secret meeting had been discovered, and Lord Aldrich was now moving to protect his conspiracy. "Actually, Lord Aldrich," the king said carefully, "Marcus was just reporting some concerning developments from his mission. Perhaps you should hear what he has discovered." Lord Aldrich's smile finally faltered slightly, and Marcus saw a flash of calculation in the advisor's eyes. The moment of truth had arrived far sooner than anyone had planned. "Of course, your majesty," Aldrich replied smoothly. "I am most interested to hear about Marcus's discoveries." Marcus looked at King Edmund, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. The king was ready to hear the truth even with Lord Aldrich present. Your Majesty, Marcus began carefully, I discovered that the rebel activity in Millbrook was not what it appeared to be. In fact, I witnessed royal guards planting false evidence and terrorizing innocent villagers. Lord Aldrich's face remained calm, but Marcus noticed his hand move slightly toward the dagger at his belt. That's a very serious accusation, Marcus. Are you certain you saw what you think you saw? Sometimes stress and fatigue can play tricks on a man's mind. I am completely certain, Marcus replied firmly. I saw Sir Garrett and Captain Roland directing the operation. I heard them discussing how my report would provide justification for military action against innocent people. King Edmund's eyes widened with shock and anger. He turned to Lord Aldrich, searching his advisor's face for any sign that would contradict Marcus's words. Aldrich, the king said slowly, you recommended both Garrett and Roland for their current positions. You also suggested sending Marcus to investigate Millbrook. What do you say to these accusations? For the first time, Lord Aldrich's composed mask slipped slightly. He realized that his carefully constructed plan was unraveling, and he had to act quickly to salvage the situation. Your Majesty, Aldrich said with apparent sadness, I fear that Marcus has been deceived by enemies of the crown. There are forces at work trying to undermine your trust in your most loyal servants. I believe Marcus has been manipulated into making these false accusations. But Marcus was ready for this response. He pulled out the intercepted letter bearing Aldrich's seal and handed it to King Edmund. Then perhaps Lord Aldrich can explain this document, which bears his personal seal and signature. King Edmund read the letter carefully, his face growing darker with each line. The evidence of corruption and manipulation was undeniable, written in Aldrich's own hand. Aldrich, the king said in a voice that could freeze flames, explain this letter. Lord Aldrich looked at the document and realized that his deception had been completely exposed. His hand moved more openly toward his weapon, as his pleasant demeanor finally disappeared completely. Your Majesty, Aldrich said coldly, you have always been too trusting and too weak to rule effectively. This kingdom needs stronger leadership if it is to survive and prosper. The admission of guilt hung in the air like a death sentence. King Edmund stepped back, his face showing the pain of ultimate betrayal by someone he had trusted completely. Guards, the king shouted. But the men who entered were not the ones who had accompanied him to the cathedral. These were Aldrich's supporters, and their loyalty clearly lay with the traitorous advisor. I'm afraid your loyal guards have been delayed, Aldrich said with a cruel smile. It's time for new leadership in this kingdom, Edmund. Your reign ends today. Marcus stepped. The battle in the cathedral was fierce but brief. Marcus fought with desperate determination, his sword moving in deadly arcs as he protected King Edmund from Aldrich's supporters. Brother Benedict had brought 12 loyal knights from houses across the kingdom, men who had been quietly gathering evidence of the conspiracy and waiting for the right moment to act. Lord Aldrich himself proved to be a skilled swordsman, far more dangerous than Marcus had expected from a court advisor. But years of comfortable palace life had made him soft, while Marcus remained at the peak of his fighting condition. Their personal duel ended when Marcus disarmed Aldrich with a clever twist of his blade, leaving the traitor on his knees before the altar. It's over, Aldrich, King Edmund said, his voice heavy with pain and anger. Your conspiracy has failed. But Aldrich laughed bitterly as he looked up from the cathedral floor. You think this ends with me? I have supporters throughout your government, your military, your nobility. Even if you kill me today, they will continue working to bring down your weak rule. King Edmund's face hardened with resolve. Then we will root them out, every single one. Marcus, you have saved not just my life, but my kingdom. How can I possibly reward such loyalty? Marcus knelt before his king, his sword still bloody from the fight. Your Majesty, serving you faithfully is reward enough. But if I may make a request, I ask that you show mercy to those who were deceived rather than actively treacherous. Many good people were manipulated by Lord Aldrich's lies. The king nodded approvingly. Spoken like a true knight. Yes, we will distinguish between the deceived and the willing conspirators. Over the following weeks, the full extent of Lord Aldrich's conspiracy was revealed through careful investigation. Brother Benedict's network of contacts proved invaluable in identifying supporters throughout the kingdom. Some, like Sir Garrett and Captain Roland, had been willing participants motivated by greed and ambition. Others had been blackmailed or deceived into cooperation. King Edmund showed wisdom in his handling of the aftermath. The willing conspirators faced trial and punishment, while those who had been manipulated were given opportunities to prove their renewed loyalty. The villages that had been terrorized, including Millbrook, received compensation and protection from future abuse. Marcus found himself promoted to the position of captain of the Royal Guard, replacing the traitorous Roland. But more than the promotion, he valued the complete trust that King Edmund now placed in him. The experience had shown both men the importance of loyalty and the dangers of blind faith in the wrong people. Lord Aldrich himself was sentenced to life imprisonment in the kingdom's most secure fortress. King Edmund had considered execution, but Marcus argued that keeping Aldrich alive might provide valuable information about other threats to the kingdom. It proved to be wise counsel, as the former advisor eventually revealed details about foreign enemies who had been supporting his conspiracy. The Festival of Harvest that year became known as the Festival of Truth, commemorating the day when the kingdom was saved from internal betrayal. Songs were written about Marcus's courage and loyalty, though he always insisted that he had simply done his duty as any true guard would have done. Brother Benedict returned to his monastery, but not before accepting an official position as advisor to King Edmund. The wise monk's counsel proved invaluable in rebuilding the kingdom's government with men of proven integrity and loyalty. Father Thomas blessed the cathedral and declared that it had been purified by the triumph of truth over deception. The prayer chamber where the final confrontation had taken place became a shrine to loyalty and honor, visited by young guards and knights seeking inspiration. 1 year later, Marcus stood once again in the castle courtyard, making his morning rounds as captain of the guard. But everything was different now. He had learned that loyalty must be earned through actions, not just words. He had discovered that even the most trusted advisor could harbor treacherous intentions. Most importantly, he had proven that a single person willing to stand up for truth could change the fate of an entire kingdom. King Edmund had grown stronger and wiser through the ordeal. He no longer relied on a single advisor, but sought counsel from many sources. He spent more time among his people, listening to their concerns and ensuring that his policies truly served their needs. The conspiracy had shaken him deeply, but it had also made him a better ruler. The kingdom of Valyria prospered under this new approach to governance. Trade routes were secured by honest officials, villages were protected by trustworthy guards, and the people felt confident that their king truly cared about their welfare. The threat of internal conspiracy had been replaced by a stronger, more united realm. As Marcus completed his morning rounds that anniversary day, he reflected on how much his life had changed. He had begun as a simple guard following orders without question. Now he was a leader, responsible for protecting not just the king's life, but the integrity of the entire government. A young guard approached him nervously, clearly wanting to ask a question but uncertain if he should interrupt the captain's thoughts. "What is it, Thomas?" Marcus asked kindly, recognizing the newest member of his guard unit. "Sir, I was wondering, how do you know who to trust? How can you be certain that the people around you are truly loyal?" Marcus smiled, remembering asking similar questions to his own mentors years ago. "Trust must be earned through consistent actions over time, Thomas. Watch how people behave when they think no one is looking. Listen to how they speak about others when those people aren't present. Most importantly, trust your instincts but verify them with evidence when the stakes are high." The young guard nodded thoughtfully. "And what if you discover that someone you trusted has betrayed that trust?" "Then you act decisively to protect those who depend on you," Marcus replied firmly. "Personal feelings cannot override duty to the greater good. It's painful, but it's necessary." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction with his life and his service. The trap that Lord Aldrich had set for him had indeed altered the kingdom's destiny, but not in the way the conspirator had intended. Instead of being used as a tool for deception, Marcus had become an instrument of truth and justice. The kingdom was safer, the king was wiser, and the people were better protected because one guard had chosen to question what he saw, rather than blindly follow orders. It was a lesson that Marcus would carry with him for the rest of his life, and one that he would teach to every guard who served under his command. The deadly trap had been turned into the kingdom's salvation, and Marcus Thornfield had become not just a guard but a guardian of truth itself.